Hi everyone, today we will be looking at Rhino curve commands, specifically the line, polyline, curve, interpolate, and arc command. A brief introduction, Rhino curves are NURV-based, that stands for non-uniform rational B-splines. There is a lot of theory online if you'd like to get into it, but in essence, NURBs are mathematical approximation or calculations for how to model geometry. And because of this, they are calculated and described by the following characteristics that includes degrees, control points, knots, and evaluation rules. So just bringing this up because some of these terms come up again, and it is kind of helpful to know why they are being referenced. So without further ado, this is going to be our working space, and these are points we will be referencing. So let's start with the line command. The line command can be found under the curve drop-down menu. It is also within this curve tab here, and on the side right there, you can always type it in as well. Oh, did not type it in correctly, so line. You always want to look at this portion here below the history window. It'll always tell you how to start a command and different options for the command. So it's asking us to find the start of the line and then the end of the line, and in essence that is your line command. You can get fancy with it. That is the middle of the line, and it produces a line that is twice as long. So there we go. You can also make an extension. You just have to select the first line, and that will create a separate line segment. You can also create angled lines. So you first have to determine a baseline from which to calculate an angle. You input the angle, 60 degrees in this case, and then you determine how long your line segment is. That can always be done by clicking or by typing in a numerical number, and let's do that again just real quick. 5, and that will be 5 millimeters, inches long, depending whatever units you're in. So polylines next. I will be typing them out. So again, you can determine the beginning of your polyline. And then you just simply just define the next points. There are a lot of options up here. One of them is this persistent close, where it just shows a line segment in order to close the polyline as a closed curve. This will toggle between a straight line segment and an arc, so you can see that how it changes. Let's turn off persistent close. Let's just do some arcs here, and you can toggle that as you go along, no matter what point you are in your polyline. So that is one complete polyline. Next we have curves. Curves are a bit more complicated if you let them. So here's where I said some of that NURBS terminology comes in. You can define what degree your curve will have. A way I like to remember this is kind of like your basic geometry graph. This curve has a degree of 1, so we can think of it as y equals x to the first power, and that essentially will always be a straight line. You can also change the degree to 2, and that's more of a parabolic nature, where y equals x squared. Just to note, circles and ellipses are in the second degree. So right there where I messed up and I clicked elsewhere, I typed U. You can also click on undo and it'll undo that last point. So for in the interest of time, I have a few degree or different curves and different degrees already defined here. And you can kind of see how those change. You can reference the color next to each degree to determine what that curve looks like. And a way I like to think about it is the higher the degree, the more it kind of flattens out. So you can kind of see that happen. One more thing to note, these curves, depending on where you click, that will determine where the control point for the curve goes. And then you can further manipulate it by just shifting these points around. So if you remember, control point was one of those NURB space characteristics. The curves will not intersect at those points, but the control points will be based off of that. And that is where the interpolate curve comes in. Let me go. So the interpolate curve will actually intersect at those points. Instead of having the control points located there and it kind of fitting with, within them. As such, Rhino will calculate the control points outside of the curve. Sorry about that. And you can also change the degrees as we did with the regular curve. And that'll definitely change the characteristic of the curve, but it will continue to intersect through those same points if you are defining it by those points. So you can kind of see the differences here. This was the degree 11 curve that we just did, and this one was the second degree curve. So that's kind of the difference between those curves. And lastly, we will look at the arc command. Arcs are basically a segment of a perfect circle. So in order to make it, you determine the start point. You start at the center point and then you determine a start and an end point for that. So that is your basic arc. If you want to be more precise after determining the center, you can enter the start and then enter a degree, and that'll give you an arc based off that degree. So that is a 90-degree arc. So that is a basic introduction into how to create arcs, interpolate curves, regular curves. Let's turn those on. Polylines and lines. So all of that you can create. And as always, feel free to just check out what's going on here and play around until you get the desired profile you are looking for.